We discuss a preseason stock report through 2 weeks for the Baltimore Ravens with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we are back here, another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. That includes over on YouTube. And we're back here on a Taco Tuesday episode. In our Taco Tuesday guest, and Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown, of course, is back with us to break down everything relating to Baltimore's 24-17 preseason win in week 2 over the Cardinals. We got some wide receiver talk coming up here in this first segment. Spencer, the Ravens, they stay busy. How you doing?
Doing quite well. They do stay busy, and the rookie class got busy last night. I think everybody that was healthy that the Ravens did draft made a play, and quite a few UDFAs as well. So fun time. The Orioles playing well. The Ravens playing well in the preseason. A fun time to be a Baltimore sports fan.
Yeah, Baltimore sports are buzzing. They really are. And again, that 24-17 win over the Arizona Cardinals in week 2, they extend their preseason winning streak to 22 games. And Spencer, I don't know if they're ever going to lose in the preseason again, honestly. I think we might just be talking about preseason wins for as long as we can do this. But I feel like for the Ravens, Spencer, we're going to get into some wide receiver talk here in this first segment. The Ravens expected to sign Demarcus Robinson. The former Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver spent some time in camp with the Las Vegas Raiders, and the specs of his deal actually came out on Monday, and Aaron Wilson provided those. It's 1 year, $1.035 million that includes $895,000 fully guaranteed. So, Spencer, a couple things here. What was your initial reaction to this signing based off of all the other moves the team could have made to the position? They decided to make this one. And also, does the money factor change any perception you had about whether his roster spot is a guarantee or not for him?
Yeah, I think he is guaranteed a roster spot. They guarantee the full $895,000. I think that's why he signed with Baltimore. They probably said, we'll give you the vet minimum and guarantee it and bring you on. And I think that's why Kyle Fuller is probably also a lock to make this team as well. So it's that minimum commitment, and the Ravens ultimately taking the cheapest way to possibly fill a role in their offense, which would be an XZ bigger body that they don't really currently have aside from Rashad Bateman. We'll see some snaps from Tylan Wallace there. Devin Duvernay will play some Z too. But ultimately, Demarcus Robinson, a bigger target that has a 14.7 average distance of target in his career. Not necessarily a burner, but a guy that is a little bit more adept downfield tracking in the Kansas City's kind of deeper offense. And also a good red zone target that Ravens fans should know pretty well. He scored a couple of touchdowns against the Ravens and can go make some contested catches, do some nice things. I don't think any real defensive coordinators ever worrying about him, or any cornerback is individually worried about him ultimately. But Demarcus Robinson kind of reminds me of, I guess, like an outside body version of Willie Snead a little bit. A guy who can go catch 30, 40, 50 passes for you probably and move the chains here and there, be a decent player. So I do expect him to move the chains. I don't know if he moves the needle a ton ultimately. Again, really taking the cheapest possible route to kind of fill that role that they need, that depth that they need, and to get some sort of veteran that was in a successful offense in. So not a huge move, or it would have been a huge monetary move, and it wasn't necessarily that, but giving him that guaranteed amount. It's the same thing guys like Pernell McPhee and quite a few other Ravens have had over the last couple of years. So I think in all likelihood he makes the 53, and that's why they brought him in.
Yeah, and I know, Spencer, we talked last week about how Baltimore is just, first of all, going through injuries right now at the position. You have James Prochet missing some time, Tylan Wallace missing some time as well. So it's like they almost had to get a body in regardless. But are you okay with them doing this Demarcus Robinson move instead of maybe going after a Will Fuller or T.Y. Hilton? Obviously circumstances, so maybe even Julio Jones, Jarvis Landry. I mean, where are you in terms of what they were able to do here at the wide receiver position opposed to the other options they had even earlier in the offseason?
Well, I'd definitely like to see Will Fuller. I don't know what the price tag on Will Fuller is. I am led to believe, based on him not doing anything so far, that it's probably a good bit higher than Demarcus Robinson, and kind of a strange situation. Someone who's been injured a ton, kind of feels like a younger version, maybe not terribly in years because Sammy Watkins is forever young, probably only like 28 or 29 if I were to check. But Will Fuller probably around 26, 27, and has that speed element. I think that they really could use that downfield element. But again, he misses time every single year, very similar to Sammy Watkins. So I would prefer to have Fuller as opposed to not having Fuller. I think that he would present that vertical threat a little bit more so than a Demarcus Robinson, but it doesn't. The Demarcus Robinson move doesn't eclipse the Ravens from needing to or having the ability to make another move later towards the trade deadline, maybe right ahead of the season. Next week as cuts happen, things like that. So curious. We see guys like Kenyon Drake already get cut, and I'm sure the Ravens will probably poach someone somewhere. They have a little bit of a unique roster construction as of now, so would be remiss to think they aren't looking at outside linebackers and maybe some tackles and some wide receivers and some cornerbacks, things of that nature, running backs as well. So I don't know if we'll see a big move, but I think this is kind of the final real free agent signing that the Ravens will make.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a complete sidetrack here. You mentioned Kenyon Drake. I forgot he did get released by the Raiders. Is that someone you consider bringing in if you're Baltimore?
Definitely. Someone who's ran really well in a gap scheme, is a decent receiving option, is coming off of injury. The Raiders, Mike Mayock, did not do the future of media analysts turned into GM front office executives much justice with the kind of contracts he gave out, giving Drake a pretty highly guaranteed deal that they felt like they wanted to get out from under in lieu of Josh Jacobs, Amir Abdullah, and some other options they have there in Las Vegas. But I like Kenyon Drake a lot in a gap offense. I think he would be a fun player in this Ravens offense and would be able to fit in nicely. I might prefer him to a Mike Davis, to be honest, just a hair. While Mike Davis has looked okay, I think Drake is maybe a little bit more dynamic ultimately. But neither of them are necessarily huge pluses or minuses either way, not real needle movers one way or the other, just kind of having that veteran presence. But I think I would rather lean towards having a Kenyon Drake, but I believe the Ravens did guarantee Mike Davis's contract as well. So kind of puts them probably in favor of keeping Davis and rolling with him.
Yeah, money's a big factor in those things, definitely. And Spencer, the Ravens have to get down to 80 players by the time today at 4 p.m. rolls around. And reportedly here while we're doing this, the Ravens have already made one of those moves in releasing wide receiver Jalen Moore. Is that a move that shocked you at all, Spencer? And then who do you kind of have on your radars, maybe more guys who could get let go by the team as the deadline rolls around?
Darius Slayton, one that has been talked about quite a bit there in New York, someone that again fits that bill as being that outside kind of vertical threat, ultimately that the Ravens would definitely love to fill. I think they would swoop him right on up. Other than that, it's a little bit difficult to really gander around and have a huge prediction. Maybe a Salvin Ahmed coming out of Miami or a Denzel Mims possibly in New York. Who knows? The Ravens themselves, Tony Jefferson put in a little bit of a slight spot right now. Other than that, kind of hard to get a pulse. K'Lavon Chase on. There's been some rumors about Ben Banigou from the Colts, Jordan Wilkins, the running back from the Titans, Malik Reed from the Broncos, a couple guys that are ultimately probably a little bit behind the eight ball, looking for maybe a new spot somewhere when things are all said and done.
Yeah, and what about from the Ravens themselves, Spencer? Is there anybody on that roster in particular that you might say, hey, by the time today at 4 p.m. rolls around, they're not going to be on the team anymore?
Man, it's tough. I think, like I said, Tony Jefferson, I feel like is in a little bit of a rock between a rock and a hard spot. Darius Washington definitely has an uphill battle a little bit. Stephen Means, a guy that it feels like they probably keep. Other than that, Ben Powers, another one that it felt like the Ravens are really trying to showcase. I think they're going to try and hang on to those guys as long as possible, though. But they end up trimming down Jalen Moore and getting some of that ahead of that a little bit. But going to be interesting to see which guys kind of fall off the bone here. Definitely some of those receivers, it looks like, will probably come off and continue. Maybe perhaps Jalen Moore, maybe a guy like Nate McCrary, I think, that has shown some things, but is just super, super far down in the depth chart, considering guys like Tyler Beatty, Mike Davis. Definitely a little bit of an uphill battle there for him.
Yeah, and for Baltimore, they did a really good job bringing in depth. I mean, this is a team that really attacked the depth in the offseason, running back, cornerback, and even for the wide receiver with not adding a veteran or drafting anybody, they brought in a ton of undrafted guys, and some of those guys have continued to play very, very well throughout training camp, the preseason. We'll get into that in the second and third segments, but they're going to have some decisions to make, whether it is today, whether it is during cut down day, and obviously with the Demarcus Robinson expected signing that would push them to 86 guys. Jalen Moore, that expected release puts him back down to 85, so then it would be 5 more moves from there. that would get them down to 80. But we'll head into our first break here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up, we'll talk about that Ravens 24-17 win over the Cardinals, talking about offensive players who either help or hurt their stock. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll have a ton to talk about still here on Locked On Ravens. But first, our next partner has a product I use literally every day, and I started taking AG1 because I wanted better health, more energy, and also a supplement that also tastes great. And so what's in this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens, and more to help you start your day right. The special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of those things. And it's also lifestyle friendly, so whether you eat vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, it is for you. And also, there are no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while also still tasting good. And also, it's a small micro habit with big benefits. It's one thing you can do every single day to take great care of yourself. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with the convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills or supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens are going to give you a free one-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is at athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NFL Network to take ownership over your health, to pick up the daily ultimate nutritional insurance. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host. Still here with Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown, talking Ravens football. And Spencer, the offensive side of the ball had some performers on Sunday night. And I want to start off with the quarterbacks because Tyler Huntley and Anthony Brown, I mean, we're talking about stock up, stock down. Those are two guys who, in my opinion, I mean, Anthony Brown did have the one interception, but guys who were both stock up in my book.
Yeah, definitely. Tyler Huntley about as sharp as can be. Really tough to think that teams like the Panthers, Falcons, Seahawks, some of those other teams ultimately that are kind of without a forever quarterback have to be looking at Huntley at this point. He looks even better than he did last year. You can definitely see how much more or much less wasted motion there is in his release, a very clean, efficient release, really leaning into throwing some four-seam fastballs and some dots all around. Haven't really gotten a great chance to see him push the ball downfield. I think his average depth of target is only about 6 yards currently, which is pretty low, and kind of what we saw last year, someone that struggled to really locate balls over 20 yards, especially to the outside. So Huntley, on top of that, has managed the pocket well, shown to be an escape artist, played decently well last year, definitely some highlight plays, and has just continued to trend upward. So with that, obviously he's had a pretty masterful performance. And then you go and take a consideration of, what they've gotten Brown behind him. And Brown, made some mistakes, did some rookie things and some UDFA things, but again, just kind of fits into that mobile mode. We see him throw a real dart over top on a touchdown to Riley Webb, who pointed out that it was probably going to be a pressure coming from the nickel off the edge. We see Tyler Beatty go pick it up after that. Looked like they hot routed up a seam, and Brown locates that one really well. So both of those quarterbacks definitely playing decently well, but Huntley looks super sharp, looks polished, looks really, really composed as well, considering he's playing with a ragtag line and kind of thrown into battle yet again for the third straight year. So Huntley at this point has just done nothing but trend upwards.
Yeah, and now, in your opinion, Spencer, if you're the Ravens, what would it take for you to trade Tyler Huntley? Because he is a very valuable backup to Lamar Jackson. The question is now, do they have enough trust in Anthony Brown if they were to get a package they couldn't refuse?
Yeah, definitely. It's a tough conversation, and not that, anyone really thinks that the Ravens are going to end up doing this, but Huntley does give them some sort of comfort behind Lamar Jackson's contract situation. If things are to turn completely sideways for whatever reason, you feel like he's a guy that doesn't leave you left completely bare and with nothing, that has gotten a ton of interest from the media for sure, and certainly from some teams around the league. So in order to part with him, I mean, it would be pretty darn tempting for a second-round pick, especially to go get that kind of value out of someone that it feels like you might be able to kind of manufacture again in an Anthony Brown and maybe a couple guys that are currently in college. And the Ravens are low-key a little bit of a quarterback factory. They've sent some guys around. Tyrod Taylor came up through this organization. They've had some guys that have had some decent stints in the NFL. Keith Wenning has well played for quite some time. Joe Flacco is still kicking around. Trace McSorley, they saw him last night. He's still kicking around and is a backup quarterback. So I think that they're pretty confident in their ability to develop that mobile sort of running style quarterback right now as a depth quarterback, a second and third string guy. So maybe that does give them the comfort to be able to part, but Huntley does look super sharp. And I feel like, might deserve an opportunity to go start somewhere at some point. So would be remiss to think that in the next 12 months, he doesn't get an opportunity somewhere in the league.
Yeah, Huntley showing he has the tools to definitely be a starter in the NFL. And you're right. He does have value. Like he is very valuable to Baltimore as a backup because, again, he has shown you that he can go out there and play well. He looks better this preseason. But again, that is driving his potential price up in a trade. And so if you're Baltimore, you have to weigh a potential asset versus what you have in Brown, how comfortable you are with that. So it is a very important conversation to have, and one that, I don't know, maybe the Ravens could shock some people. I personally don't expect it right now, but maybe they surprise me. But the running back position, Spencer, the Ravens as a team only averaged 2.6 yards per carry, but it felt like Tyler Baden, despite averaging only 2.8, had a better game than he did in the first game. Mike Davis, 6 for 18, Nate McCrary, 1 for 9, and then Justice Hill, 5 for 5, so a bit of a downtick for him. What's your stock up, stock down for the running back room based off that second preseason game?
Definitely for Justice Hill and Tyler Beatty continuing to look better and better. You see Hill just breaking tackles, getting the ball inside, doing some fun things overall, playing a ton of special teams. And we heard Craig Van Steer's comments, Ravens running backs coach, talking about how he looks like a more complete player than he did pre-injury. And you definitely see him looking a little bit more tenacious in terms of an attacking style of a running back as opposed to being that speed finesse guy ultimately. And then Beatty comes in and just has some awesome pass pro on that same touchdown. You know, they call out the blitz pre-snap, the one to Riley Webb, and Beatty goes and picks off a nickel right on the side and off the left side of the line and cleans that up, forces the DB to have to go through him, doesn't panic, doesn't overplay it or underplay it, and allows them to go through a touchdown on a blitz that they picked up on. Then, of course, goes and makes a couple plays, scores himself a touchdown. Looks like he's a pretty natural hands catcher for the most part. So Beatty continuing to look good, and I think he's going to keep catching more momentum the more touches he gets.
Yeah, and so, Spencer, for the Ravens, they do have some good running backs out there, and obviously I think it gives them a lot more confidence with the, return of J.K. Dobbins off the PUP list. They also have Gus Edwards, the return for him, looking like it might not be week 1 at this point. So with guys like Beatty, guys like Justice Hill, and also guys like Davis to potentially pick up that workload early on, it's definitely huge. And moving on to wide receiver, I'm not going to put Isaiah Likely in this conversation. He's a tight end. We'll talk about him in a few minutes, but it was a decently quiet day overall for the wide receivers. Riley Webb, as you mentioned, led the team, 2 receptions, 46 yards, and that 1 touchdown, which, just a beautiful pass by Anthony Brown, by the way. I want to make that known. But Mekhi Polk had a catch for 19 yards. Bailey Gaither, 2 for 18. Shamar Bridges, 1 for 8. A pretty quiet day overall for the wide receivers.
Yeah, I really like what I saw from Riley Webb. I like what I saw from Shamar Bridges nonetheless. Didn't quite get the accurate targets and the opportunities that he did last week. Did look like he got 1 deep target, and the DB did not allow him to stack at all. So still waiting on the all-22 to go back and look at that one, but saw him just be really efficient still in and out of breaks for a guy of his size. He ran a speed out that there was no kind of imbalance at the top of the route, and goes and makes a kind of acrobatic catch there on the sideline. But Riley Webb definitely stole the show quite a few times, including that touchdown. Guy who's 6'2", reportedly runs in the 4.4 range, and showed what he can do a little bit. Caught a couple passes. We see Mekhi Polk accelerating a ton, some open in the end zone, kind of showing some stop-start. At the same time, he probably should have walked into the end zone after he caught a ball around the 10-yard line and just had that rookie frantic moment that we didn't see from guys like Beatty or Isaiah Likely, where he didn't continue and just take the low-hanging fruit and walk on in. He assumed someone was behind him, assumed there was someone near him to tackle him, and starts juking the air, ends up getting caught by the turf monster, just playing a little bit ahead of himself. But I like the movement skills I've seen from him in terms of the ability to throttle up or throttle down. Very disappointed, in Benjamin Victor, a guy that has the kind of size and skill set that would help round out that Ravens room, kind of like a Demarcus Robinson in some ways, and just really hasn't shown anything in these games so far. Haven't really seen anything yet that makes you think, wow, this guy, should be the one of them to carry on into this game. So a little bit disappointing there. Obviously, Jalen Moore doesn't do much, ends up getting cut ahead of the 4 p.m. deadline on Monday. So ultimately, this room is still bits and pieces. It looked like Webb played a ton on special teams. It looked like Polk did a good bit too. Shamar Bridges just a bit. So curious to see which one of those guys continue to claw, continue to fight, and find opportunities. But really feels like there is that 3-horse race between Webb, Polk, and Bridges right now to try and go win that 6th or 5th final receiving spot on this team, whatever they end up doing. And probably 1 or 2 of those guys will get retained on the practice squad. But right now, kind of my money is still on Shamar Bridges just because of the size, the movement skill, and what we saw him do in the first week.
Yeah, the third preseason game is going to be huge, I think, for this competition. And whether, with Demarcus Robinson, his spot with the guaranteed money you mentioned, Spencer, probably being guaranteed at this point, you have to look and say, is this a situation where maybe Tylan Wallace goes on IR, James Roche goes on IR, and they keep somebody and then they figure it out, or what happens there because of the fact that is this a situation where Baltimore keeps 6 wide receivers and then you're looking at the Shamar Bridges, Mekhi Polk, Riley. But I agree. I think Shamar Bridges is still my favorite right now. I wish I would have seen a little bit more out of him, but he did make a nice catch later in the game. So I think that the third preseason game against the Commanders is going to be massive for that competition. But Spencer, if we're doing stock up, stock down, we cannot get rid of Isaiah Likely hype, and I'm glad we can't get rid of it because it is all over the place, and I'm loving it because he is somebody just impressive. 8 catches on 8 targets, 100 yards, 1 touchdown. His stock is through the roof right now.
It certainly is, and for good reason. And again, it's kind of like Travis Jones's rise. Well, he didn't test the way that Travis Jones did, but Likely was, I think, the third best producer in terms of yards per route run, in terms of a lot of grading and advanced metrics in college football among all tight ends in the last 5 years. So, a ton of production there. He was at a smaller school. People definitely discount that production. Goes to the combine, doesn't run a 4.6, runs a 4.8. So obviously dips down through there as opposed to a Travis Jones who tested super well at the combine, but Likely comes in to OTAs. There's videos, there's clips, there's Lamar Jackson talking about him. Then they get into training camp and all of the beat coverage journalists are talking about him nonstop. And Lamar's talking about him again. And Mark Andrews is talking about him. And all this buzz swirling around Isaiah Likely. And, you want to say, well, it's just training camp or it's just preseason. But again, when the momentum kind of carries from college through the entire summer nonstop, and then you go see a guy who showed everything you want to see before, during, and after the catch in terms of separating with physicality, separating with quickness, recognizing soft spots in zone coverage, being able to beat man, going and making contested catches, transitioning into a runner really cleanly, and then after the catch being shifty as well as elusive, as well as strong, as well as, having some vision and having some sort of balance to him and not panicking or, getting too far ahead of himself. It feels like he's playing with urgency, but there's no frenetic energy about it. None of that rookie jitters in the preseason. And, he's just playing really fast and really hard, and he might not know what's going on all the way, but he's just playing. And, if you go ask him what play was 8 plays ago, he has no idea. Feels like the exact opposite of that. Feels like he understands this offense. He understands where the quarterback needs him to be, regardless of who the quarterback is, really, even though him and Huntley had quite the rapport. And just completely had a full, balanced, awesome game in every possible aspect. At this point, he's run 29 routes in the preseason. 21 of them he's been aligned in the slot. He is being used as a receiver. He'll probably line up in the backfield. He has lined up in line a bit. They usually aren't running at him or to him as opposed to away a little bit more. So that could be a bit of a tell when he is in line. Going to him in big situations, he has a great feel for where the sticks are. His hands are outstanding. His concentration is outstanding. We haven't seen him downfield necessarily yet, but he might not need to be a downfield presence ultimately in that kind of backup Mark Andrews role that they will roll him out and be a rotational player. Just kind of feels like he has the opportunity to replace what Hayden Hurst brought to this offense in many, many ways, and hopefully give a little bit more than that. So the buzz is swirling on Isaiah Likely for good reason. He was trending behind only House of Targaryen last night on Twitter. So everybody was talking about him. Greg Olsen loved him. Everybody in the world talking about Isaiah Likely, and again, for good reason.
Yeah, and he just looked confident out there, really. He looked like he understood what he was doing, and it translated. You mentioned it wasn't just one aspect where he impressed. He had a complete game in this game against Arizona, and that's really one of the things that impressed me, where he was able to work out in space and able to juke guys still, being able to get away from guys and also being able to go with contested catches and catch through contact too, which is on the touchdown. He got rocked on that touchdown, and he still was able to hold on to the football. But Spencer, offensive line-wise, that'll be the last place we hit here before heading into our final break. Who are some stock up, stock down guys from what you saw in week 2?
Well, we certainly saw Juwan James come out and get beat, and we saw Daniel Faalele come out and get beat. Both of those guys had some rough play early on in that game, especially. Faalele ends up going down a little bit, does grit out the injury, comes back and looks all right, but waiting for the film to come out still. But looked like he was getting tested on his vertical set and just wasn't using his length to his advantage enough. He was gator arming a little bit and letting guys get the edge and not extending and using his prodigious length and strength to wash them out. Juwan James, I'm not quite sure what happened, but he got beat like a drum quite a few times. So both of those guys definitely go in stock down. It looked like Ben Cleveland had an awesome game. He was locking guys up. He was processing well. He looked like he was playing fast and thinking quickly as well. I thought Tristan Colon looked nice. David Sharp, we didn't think about him at all, playing right tackle, a guy that the Ravens did have around last year that I did want them to end up retaining, and they did. So he looked sharp as well. McCary had some struggles at snapping the ball. Ben Powers had some struggles snapping the ball. Both of those guys, though, after the ball was snapped, did look pretty solid from what I was able to see ultimately. So Khalil McKenzie, another guy that's gotten some snaps in there. Tyree Phillips bouncing around, ends up playing 48 snaps at, I believe, left guard, and I think a couple at tackle, if I'm not mistaken. End up getting a bunch of run there. So I'm going to go ahead and say Tyree Phillips wins this left guard job. I think that Ben Cleveland is going to be the backup to Zeitler for now and might end up superseding Phillips a couple weeks into the season if he struggles. And I think that Ben Powers is going to get dealt. And I wouldn't say there's a long shot for Tristan Colon to remain on this team, as I do think McCary is more of the sixth man to play any spot as opposed to the backup center. I do, in fact, think center is the worst place to put him along the offensive line as opposed to the best.
Yeah, and for Phillips, I agree. I maintain confidence on yesterday's show that, look, even though he had 3 penalties, I still think he is going to be the guy to win the job. And obviously you want to clean up on the penalties, but you get them out now instead of in November, or December, or January, and you're fine. So that's where I am with that. But I agree. The offensive line has some playmakers on it. The tackle competition, hopefully that'll be able to improve a little bit, because right now Ronnie Stanley's still on the PUP list at the time of this recording. Hopefully we get some news on that somewhat soon, but for now it's all eyes on Jawan James and even David Sharp, as you talked about there, Spencer. We'll head into our final break here though on the show. Coming up, we'll be diving into the defensive stock report, talking about guys who helped or hurt their stock. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about LinkedIn. And as you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. I've used LinkedIn Jobs for a ton of things in the past. Before you can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that your hiring so our network can help you find the right people to hire. There are simple tools you can use, like screening questions, to make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. As you know, every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here with our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with Spencer Schultz. And Spencer, when you're talking about defensive stock up, stock down, I mean, again, it's like Isaiah Likely. Travis Jones stock through the roof right now. The injury kind of throws a little bit of a cloud on that, but it does not take away from the game that he had on Sunday night.
No, it does not. And he can win fast as a pass rusher. He's difficult to move. The power that he possesses in his hands all the way through. I mean, even the way that he sent Trace McSorley flying after he whooped someone quickly. I think he whooped the Cardinals backup center very quickly. Just the raw strength that he has at such a young age is pretty terrifying to think about if you're an opposing quarterback. Just continues to get better and better. Unfortunate that he ends up with a knee hyperextension. And, while it is a saving grace that he didn't have a worse injury, at the same time, it's going to be tough. It means that his knee is probably not going to be 100% until next offseason, something that can require a little additional attention in the offseason. So hopefully he's able to get pretty close back to 100%. But I would, be remiss to think that doesn't linger for months and months and months while he's trying to play through it and get back as quickly as possible, and so on and so forth. Even if he takes his time and takes a slow roll, it's probably not going to be fully healthy until he has months out of the football season to work on it. So gives him a little bit of adversity to work through. Luckily, not a huge injury, but Travis Jones looked absolutely dominant yet again.
Yeah, and, first and foremost, very, very pleased it was not anything more serious. I think the Ravens got out with a break there. But one of the good things about the Ravens, their defensive line room, is it is very deep, first of all. And they also have guys who potentially might not even make this roster, who honestly should, and beyond a 53-man, and Aaron Crawford, guys like Isaiah Mack. What do you see from those guys?
Aaron Crawford got after it. I think he got after the quarterback like 3 times, and he had a quarterback hit as well. Looked really sharp again. Another quick guy. Him and Travis Jones have been a wrecking crew along this defensive line so far, 2 weeks into the preseason. So those two looking pretty darn sharp. We saw Rashad Nichols go get himself a little bit of a sack there. Saw Charles Wiley, I believe, have back-to-back sacks. One of them was like a half sack or something, but I think he was also waived at one point earlier last week. So rebounds well, gets in at the end there, and goes and really helps them clinch a win with a couple big plays. So someone that is in consideration. A couple real defined players up front for the Ravens that have made some noise. And we see Isaiah Mack relentlessly after the quarterback a bit too. I feel like he had at least 4 or 5 pressures in this game. So all of those guys are totally stacked. It appears Anthony Weaver's doing an awesome job with the younger guys and the backup second and third team guys. And not to mention, they do have Michael Pierce. They do have Calais Campbell. We saw Justin Madubuike get into this game for, I think, 6 snaps. Not enough to see a ton out of him. I think we saw Broderick Washington for like 7 snaps. So not a ton to write home about those guys quite yet. But ultimately, a very deep, very talented group headlined by a guy like Calais Campbell. They've got depth, they've got veterans, they've got youth, and they've got super youth and guys like Travis Jones as well. So a guy like Broderick Washington could probably start some places in the league and is going to be a rotational player for them alongside another guy like Brent Urban that, is a consummate veteran. So they really have every kind of flavor in this defensive line. They've got some smaller, quicker guys. They've got some enormous, plotting, two-gapping guys. They've got a Calais Campbell and a Brent Urban that are both just skyscrapers with length, all kinds of stuff for this defensive line.
Yeah, it's exciting to see just how much depth they have, and it's going to, again, make for some tough conversations when it comes down to getting to 53 guys, because you want to have guys like Aaron Crawford and Isaiah Mack on your team, and it feels pretty unlikely they're going to be able to get snuck onto the practice squad. If you're the Ravens, it feels like they are 53-man bound somewhere. So, I don't know, maybe there's a handshake somewhere you can sneak another guy on depending on the health of Travis Jones and what his timetable actually is. But yeah, it was impressive overall. And yeah, the Wiley story, he was like supposed to be cut, and then Trent Harris got injured in practice, and so the Ravens decided not to cut him. But Spencer, let's stick with the front seven. Let's talk about the inside linebackers, because for me, Josh Ross had another phenomenal game, someone who has quickly risen up the ranks for me and is now, I remember we talked about Jacoby McClain earlier in the offseason. It feels like now Josh Ross is that inside linebacker that might have to track on that number 4 spot.
He definitely does, and I would be pretty shocked to see him not make the 53 the way he's been playing. If he goes and has any semblance of a performance in Washington, where I imagine he'll get to play a little bit earlier in the game, maybe a few more snaps, asked to do a few more things. But first snap, I think, comes into this game, shoots a gap, sees the play coming a mile away, sticks the running back a couple yards in the backfield, makes a huge play. In coverage, he has been smart. He's not a really dynamic mover in coverage. He's not someone that's going to go play man-to-man and be able to run and, run a 4-4 and do some crazy things, but has just played smart, played consistently. He's been in Mike McDonald's defense already, and it feels like that's really unlocked him to go play fast. I think he had about 14 snaps in coverage, and he let up, 1 reception for -1 yards. I think he went and blew up a little swing pass or a screen, something like that too. So it has just been a real pleasure to watch. He's been taking on blocks. Looks a little bit kind of like, for lack of a better word, a poor man's kind of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, just the way he's smaller, and he has been playing quicker than offensive linemen, beating blocks, beating running backs to their spot, and being a smart player in coverage that's positioning himself and not taking himself out of play. He's just playing with a ton of confidence, and I think that he is going to make this roster very firmly. I would be pretty shocked to watch them not bring him up, and it really is going to be tough. They do like Christian Welch a ton. They like Christian Welch on special teams. Christian Welch has played a lot. I think we saw some good things out of Malik Harrison for sure, especially after an up-and-down week last week. Just hit so hard. Hasn't been quite the player in space that maybe he's capable of, but ultimately between the tackles, he is a rock solid human being that hits with authority and has made a ton of plays.
Yeah, and I want to go back to outside linebacker, Spencer, because one guy who it doesn't feel like we've seen a ton from is Dalen Hayes. I mean, where are you at with him right now?
Yeah, I think we're watching Dalen Hayes work through, trying to figure out his pass rush right now a little bit. Seen him doing some cross chops, seen him doing some rips, seen him doing some inside counters and things. Just hasn't quite gotten that beat down all the way on it yet, where he feels like he's in great rhythm. Did kind of get, I believe, picked a little bit by a tight end. He had coverage assignment on a running back. The running back ends up getting an explosive gain downfield. He does go chase him down, which was fun to see. Watch a guy that can play edge go run a running back down from behind in space. So that was definitely a positive thing. Moves in space like an inside linebacker. I think he has definitely gotten flack. Some of it, I guess, worthwhile, but not someone I'm ready to put stock down yet on necessarily. While he did make a couple mistakes, someone that I think has all the potential in the world to come in and make a little bit of an impact for the Ravens.
Yeah, and I think his roster spot, like he has one. I'd be pretty shocked to see them move on from Dalen Hayes just based off of the depth issues they currently have there right now. But still, he's a player that I think is going to be relied upon. And so him hopefully being able to work through that stuff now in August instead of again in November, December, January is going to be huge for him. But especially let's talk about the secondary. There were a lot of players who were vying for either more playing time or for roster spots. What was your overall takeaway in terms of guys who either helped or hurt their stuff?
It looked like Kyle Hamilton was moving pretty well out there. I think that we saw him just look in sync for quite some time, especially down in the goal-to-go area. While the broadcast did highlight that he should have stuck with his man, he shut down a receiver for 5 seconds while he was running with him in the end zone. Trace McSorley scrambling, breaks, towards the line of scrimmage. Hamilton gives up his guy, and McSorley tries to fire one, can't complete the pass. Definitely could have chalked that up, but he was covering the guy like glue for 4 or 5 seconds prior to the throw, which was really impressive. So I thought it was funny that the broadcast pointed that out about that play. Then we go see him get his hands on a ball, showing his length, showing just being a football player. He is so large. He has such a huge wingspan. He's a gigantic safety, like one of the biggest ones where you're going to see in this league. Jayon Curse, Cam Chancellor, the only ones that come to mind that have that kind of size and length about them. So I thought he was running really well. Gets off a block and ends up, missing a tackle. And then there's this whole thing going on about his tackling right now. We'll see. Definitely could see him being a little sloppy in the regular season. Missed tackles happen. Some of the best players, it's like drops for receivers. Some guys do miss tackles while they're great tacklers. Some guys do drop the football while they're great receivers. But I liked what I saw of him a lot, actually, ultimately. Pepe Williams, someone that I do think is both very talented in certain roles, is also very limited and shouldn't be asked to do certain things. Looks really good at what he is good at, which is zone coverage, eyes on the quarterback, being able to break, coming downhill, playing in the box, playing between the numbers and kind of underneath a little bit more so than asking him as opposed to go, press a slot receiver and run with them on a crossing route across the football field. I don't think he just doesn't seem – I need to look at it further. There's something going on. He can't quite run with slot receivers on kind of extended routes and things like that. So I think he's a little limited, but also a really useful player to have that's going to make an impact as a rookie. His interception was great. It looked like the receiver was supposed to work back to the quarterback, and he was just right there behind waiting for it. Ends up getting a pick. I think he showed some things, as a returner a little bit, on special teams a little bit, lays the wood on a big hit in the flat, and just tackles through a running back on third down to get off the field. Big hitter for his size, for sure. It's hard not to think about Tavon Young in many ways. We saw Armour-Davis Washington, another smaller guy, let up a touchdown, but he did have really tight coverage on that. He was face guarding the receiver, and the receiver made a great catch. So that one I'm not giving him, 10 points away from for. Just happens sometimes. We've seen it happen to Marlon Humphrey. You'll see it happen to Armour-Davis Washington. But then ends up closing the game out with a huge pass breakup where he's probably being interfered with, and also had another nice play. Brandon Stevens, I thought, was very impressive. Had a couple penalties and things like that nature, a late hit kind of thing. All right, get that out in the preseason. That's fine. The DPI that he had, it was a DPI. He did hook around the shoulder, but he did it for no reason. He looked so clean against Andy Isabella, turning, opening up his hips, running, positioning himself, finding the ball in the air, all of those things. He just was a little too aggressive when he didn't need to be with that hand. But I really loved seeing the way his hips were able to swivel, the way he was able to maintain leverage in situations, and his recovery speed. He's a phenomenal athlete. So I think there will be some growing pains if they're transitioning him back out to outside corner, like it does look like a bit. But love what I saw out of him in many ways too. And that really sums it up for this secondary. Tony Jefferson didn't look too sharp. It is what it is. He's, a veteran playing. He's 30 years old playing the preseason. I'll give him his licks there. Did miss a couple tackles, things like that. I thought Geno Stone, again, didn't have some big pick or anything, but saw range, saw him over the top, saw him lurking, balls get thrown deep, and he's kind of there out of nowhere into the frame, things like that. So haven't really been able to get a great look at the full DBs. All 22 has not come out yet for me, but Kyle Fuller finally, played really well, played 9 snaps in this game, looked sharp, which is the irony of kind of really every Baltimore media member just roasting him apart throughout this entire time. Again, he's another veteran guy. Some guys know they need to ease in ramp their body up slowly and kind of peak into the regular season. And I think Kyle Fuller's doing exactly that. Is he going to be a great player? I don't think so. Is he going to be, a game changer? I don't think so. He's past his prime. I think he can be a serviceable veteran cornerback. They're probably going to need, especially early as Marcus Peters gets integrated back into playing healthy football.
Yep. They have so much depth at the secondary position. And Spencer, I couldn't get out of this episode without saying Jordan Stout, stock through the roof right now.
They are. He looks fantastic. He has complete control of the football. He has enough leg to go put that ball as high in the air as he wants, while also being able to locate it. He has been coffin cornering the heck out of guys. He's been able to roll. Should have had a punt down at the 1, but a special teamer wanted to play it a little conservative, which is probably a good idea because if you let it go, that's a minus that you didn't need to get. So Jordan Stout's been incredible, kicking some field goals, scoring some touchdowns apparently as well. All kinds of stuff there for Jordan Stout. And I think the Ravens drafted him in the 4th round for a reason. Was the number 1 punter in this draft class, despite the existence of Punt God up in Buffalo. If you go back and listen to the Baltimore Beatdown live stream, I spotted that right away. I said, I think the Ravens, if they take a punter, it's going to be Jordan Stout, not Mr. Matareza. They did exactly that. The kid is special. The Ravens are the best special teams scouting, development, and entity in football ultimately, and they nailed it yet again.
They did. And it just feels like there's so much to Stout's game. It's not just the leg. He's able, you mentioned the coffin corner kicks he had, and it feels like, some are worried about maybe the drop off from Sam Cook to Jordan Stout. There might be a couple rookie mistakes here and there, but I do feel confident in Stout's ability overall. But Spencer, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for hopping on here, doing a little stock up, stock down with me. What do you have going on over at Baltimore Beatdown and what you're working on?
Breaking down the tape, articles on BaltimoreBeatdown.com, find podcast Beatdown, the Baltimore Beatdown podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, and just continuing to keep working through this preseason, trying to bring some light to players who do well, things guys could improve on, all that kind of good stuff. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Yeah, thank you so much, Spencer. And again, the work in Spencer's links will be in the description down below on YouTube. Be sure to check it all out. He does great stuff, as you heard here for about 40 minutes today. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, we're diving into more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.